Good evening to the beautiful people of YouTube. The greatest. The greatest there was, and ever will be. Back again for your viewing pleasure. Late night. Late nights with FMT. What more could you want from your YouTube algorithm? This is as good as it gets. The best has yet to come, and won't it be fine? You think you've seen the sun, and bup bup boop boom bum bum. As you might be able to tell if you are a regular viewer, my plan is to generally do one of these every night at roughly this time. Let's say between 10 and 10 p.m. and midnight Eastern time. Just because that's sort of the routine I'm on. I'm in New Hampshire. I'm doing things. I'm observing the electoral goings on. And you can tune in if you like. You can dance if you want to. You can leave it all behind. All right. So the big news, in scare quotes, that's consuming DC in the context of this impeachment trial is that John Bolton is back. He has written a book that, one way or another, has been leaked to the New York Times. Shocker. I never would have predicted that. I never would have predicted that such a leak might occur in the midst of the impeachment trial. My mind is blown. First, let me make a point. Let's step back for a moment. How nutty is it that Democrats have effectively pinned their hopes for imposing accountability on Trump on the ability of John Bolton, maybe the most deranged and unreconstructed hawk in the entire American political landscape? The guy is a maniac. Think of the harm he's already done. He had done much harm prior to Trump appointing him as National Security Advisor in 2018. But even in the relatively short time that he was in the administration, from April 2018, I believe, to September of 2019, so around a year and a half, let's recall a number of the things that he did. He blew up the Hanoi summit with Kim Jong-un in 2019. Bolton's presence at that summit caused negotiations with North Korea to falter, and it remains to be seen whether they can be revitalized. Trump, shortly after, did physically go to North Korea, which was a historic step, and I applauded that at the time and was critical of Democrats who were mocking it. But at a key diplomatic juncture, Bolton's very presence blew up the negotiations. That's one thing. Bolton helped spearhead the failed regime change initiative in Venezuela, where, if you recall, around a year ago now, the idea was that the U.S. was going to be sending humanitarian aid via convoys into Venezuela because they're just so altruistic, those U.S. government officials. They have no ulterior motive other than to just make sure that everybody has their food and medicine in Venezuela. They love the Venezuelan people and want them to prosper. They don't want to overthrow the government. No. Except was given over the course of his presidency was when he was in Florida speaking to what I guess he perceived to be a uh, a Venezuelan sort of expat audience. And it was like a John Bolton speech about how the U.S. is going to, invoke a modern day version of the Monroe Doctrine to exert and impose its power all throughout the Western Hemisphere, and that included overthrowing the government of Venezuela. So that was another failed John Bolton regime change initiative. And then one more. I'll just leave it at 3 for now because we don't have all night. John Bolton stridently opposed, and this was shortly before he was fired, but John Bolton stridently opposed any peace accord with the Taliban that could have ended the Afghanistan war. John Bolton was against that. Trump seems, at least impulsively, was for it, but John Bolton did what he could to override that, and sure enough, the peace accord with the Taliban was thwarted. In 2019, I don't know if you saw this, there was just a report that I tweeted earlier from Stars and Stripes, the military newspaper, which stated something that got almost zero attention, not surprisingly, which was that the U.S. dropped more bombs and other munitions in Afghanistan last year, 2019, than any other year since documentation began. So we get this rhetoric about how Trump wants to end the war in Afghanistan, and he's just being overridden by his advisors, and maybe there is some truth to that. But the war is escalating. Why are we dropping more bombs than ever on Afghanistan? For what tangible purpose? So we have the occupation ongoing in Afghanistan, meaning physical presence of U.S. troops. And on top of that, we have an intensified bombardment. What's the objective in Afghanistan now? Can anybody say that? Can anybody have identified that to me? What is there, as somebody asked in the chat, what is left to bomb in Afghanistan? Nobody can even make an argument in favor of the policy. The policy just is on this glide path where the inertia behind it ensures that it just doesn't change. And in fact, gets worse. So if you know anybody who can make an affirmative argument for why John Bolton's preferred strategy that was enacted by Trump in Afghanistan is a correct or sound one, let me know, because I haven't exactly heard it. So those are 3 of John Bolton's accomplishments, just in the brief tenure of his being national security advisor under Trump, to say nothing of everything he's done prior to that in the Bush administration, in his private, personal advocacy. Oh, and by the way, a 4th, just because it's even crazier, and I don't want to sell John Bolton short. Remember the first time that Trump contemplated bombing Iran back in June of last year, and he called it off at the last second? Guess who was demanding that he not call it off and that he go through with the bombing? That's right, Johnny Boy. Okay? So an extremely dangerous and pernicious person to have anywhere near power, much less the position of national security advisor, which is one of the most powerful positions available in the realm of U.S. foreign policy. So this is the guy that Democrats have decided is their great hope to really provide a magic bullet to take down Trump. And the leaks were laundered, as usual, through the New York Times. And now they're going to have, maybe, Bolton testify. I saw Mitt Romney, who Democrats are incessantly begging to stand up and do what is right for the nation. Please, Mitt. Please help us out. We will put you into the annals of history if you seize the moment and get on board with our trivial procedural maneuvers in the course of this impeachment trial. And it seems like he may do it. Today, Romney made a comment that he did believe that there were going to be enough Republicans to come on board with the proposal to bring forward Bolton to the trial. So Bolton's going to be a national star now, especially if that witness, if he is allowed to testify at the trial. Just like sometimes you got to step back and realize the absurdity of what is being done here. John Bolton is utterly demented, and we're now, if you're the Democrats, we're now relying on him to give the smoking gun evidence against Trump, and in so doing, we're relying on John Bolton to provide an accurate and sensible and factually grounded depiction of events related to U.S. foreign policy. I wouldn't trust anything John Bolton says. Not a thing with respect to how he portrays events related to U.S. foreign policy. He's the least trustworthy person, maybe in the entire country, on that subject matter. But we're all supposed to forget about that. We're just supposed to stand up and cheer the prospect of John Bolton being trotted out before the Senate trial. And we're all supposed to be really excited about his book manuscript. I mean, give me a freaking break. The farce of this impeachment stuff, it just compounds over time. And if you're only in the mindset of, wow, whatever the newest revelation against Trump is, we gotta egg it on because this is our hope for getting Trump out of office, and then we'll get Mike Pence. Woo! If that's your mindset, then of course you're not going to have any critical distance on any of this. You're just going to be in reflexive knee-jerk partisan mode, and that's a not very analytically useful mode to be in, especially with something as historically significant as this trial going on. And it is historically significant, even if most people probably aren't paying a whole lot of attention to it, because as I've mentioned many times before, this is only the third impeachment ever in all of U.S. history. And it's the first that has direct bearing on U.S. foreign policy. So that means we have an extremely powerful precedent being entrenched by way of this impeachment, whether or not there's a conviction, which there almost certainly will not be. But just the impeachment alone ratifies a precedent. And the precedent here pertains to the foreign policy domain. So if we have all these national security state bureaucrats and officials being valorized, and now it culminates with John Bolton, they're the ones now who are central to that creation of a precedent. And I'm not going to just disregard all that because you want me to join the anti-Trump, cheerleading squad. I'm happy to be anti-Trump where it's rational and targeted and substantive. This would not be an example of that, just like so much of the conventional Trump resistance has been since he assumed office, and frankly well before, because even before the origins of this narrative that culminated in impeachment are from well before Trump ever took office. We don't even have an exact date to pinpoint on. There are theories that seem plausible that the Russiagate stuff began months before Trump took office. And impeachment is just the ugly stepsister of Russiagate. That's why you have Mueller being invoked over and over. That's why you have Russian aggression constantly being warned about by the impeachment managers, it's because it's all part of the same narrative continuum. And if you heard me say that before, so be it. I'll keep repeating it because very few people in the media seem to have any awareness of this whatsoever. And if they do have an awareness of it, they like it. And I don't like it. And therefore, I'm going to try to communicate to you to the best of my ability why you would be well served to not like it either, because it's dangerous, irrespective of your immediate feelings about Trump or the propriety of his phone call with Ukrainian President Zelensky, where he mentioned Joe Biden. Oh my God, sound the alarms. Think about it. In the annals of U.S. history, the only foreign policy related offense deemed impeachable is Trump mentioning Joe Biden on a phone call. None of the coups, none of the crippling sanctions, none of the illegal preemptive invasions, none of the proxy wars, none of the assassinations, none of the drone bombings, none of the embargoes, none of the sieges, none of the meddling. Nope, none of that. None of that's impeachable. What's impeachable is that Trump got on a phone call and rambled about Rudy Giuliani and said, hey, talk to Rudy about my theories of a Democratic National Committee server in Ukraine somewhere. That's what the political class in DC, the Democratic political class, has deemed worthy of impeachment, whereas none of the other stuff was ever even considered. I made a video of this shortly after Pelosi announced the impeachment inquiry in September. She was asked in 2006, after she was first elected to the speakership, will you pursue an impeachment of George W. Bush? And she scoffed. She said pursuing an impeachment of George W. Bush over his conduct in the Iraq War would be a, quote, waste of time. So what does that tell you about their priorities? That wasn't ancient history. That was, what is it, 14 years ago? Not that long. Guess it depends how old you are, but I remember that. And I was a stupid 18-year-old. Wait, was I 18 in 2006? Yeah, 17, 18. So that's, I think, something to be that it would be behoove you to bear in mind as this cable news and Twitter drama unfolds. Okay. And then also on impeachment, one thing that's a bit aggravating is I listened to Ken Starr, the special prosecutor who bedeviled Bill Clinton for years in the Whitewater and Lewinsky matter that culminated in Bill Clinton's impeachment. I listened to him, who spoke today as part of the presidential legal team. And then I listened to Alan Dershowitz, who also gave a presentation tonight in defense of Trump. And I can't help but think that when contrasted with the performance of Adam Schiff, Gerald Nadler, Sylvia Garcia, Jason Crow, Zoe Lofgren, the impeachment managers for the Democrats, that they sound rational and measured and well-grounded compared to the Democrats. And that doesn't give me any pleasure to say. I'd rather be rooting against those two in most circumstances. I think Starr's conduct, and I wasn't an adult at the time, but I've read about it and researched it. Starr's conduct during the Clinton matter was ridiculous. Largely, it's complicated. And Dershowitz, even though I've spoken to him in the past, I actually had him on a old podcast episode just because he wrote an introduction to the a book version of the Mueller report, and so that's what we discussed. But on many things, I don't agree with him on the substance. And so I would almost prefer to be in a position where I could have them as my adversaries. But when they are espousing a logic that is much more sensible than the Democrats, that's impossible. For example, Dershowitz tonight made a good point, and this is one that I've mentioned before in various ways. He said that because of the ambiguity of this abuse of power charge, which is in Article 1 of the impeachment articles that was passed, think of how it might constrain presidential behavior in the future. And the hypothetical scenario he raised was, I think, valid, or at least has enough validity that's worth taking seriously. Say a future president, whether it's Bernie or whomever, decides to withhold aid to Israel until they change their behavior. So, for instance, until they cease construction of illegal settlements. That's a worthwhile policy goal. But in light of the precedent that's been entrenched as a result of this impeachment, President Bernie or whomever could, and probably will now, be accused of committing an impeachable offense. Because if you can allege with any degree of basis that action was taken not exclusively to advance the common national interest, but instead was done so the president might be able to obtain some kind of political benefit, the impeachable offense allegations are going to flood in. Because it's difficult to disentangle when a president is taking an action purely to advance the national interest and when a president is taking an action to obtain a political benefit. Sometimes those two are one and the same. So, in other words, if a President Bernie believes that withholding military aid to Israel is a worthwhile policy goal on its own terms, but also that it could help him politically because, let's say, it pleases members of the Arab American community and they give him more donations as a result of his action. You could say that he derived a political benefit from that, even if it's also a sound policy. So those are sort of commingled motives. And as Dershowitz points out, it becomes even more dodgy or dicey because the standard we're told that we should use to assess Trump's motive is basically reliant on divining Trump's interior mental state or his psychological state. It's impossible. So we don't know. We're supposed to believe that he had a corrupt motive. But what if Trump was musing about these investigations, whether into Burisma and the Bidens or into the 2016 stuff with Ukraine and the DNC server? What if his motive wasn't sort of consciously corrupt, right? What if he did think that goading potentially the initiation of those investigations was within the U.S. national interest, even if it also happened to benefit him, theoretically? Well, I mean, that might be a reason to not like Trump. It might be a reason to object to his conduct. It might be a reason to vote him out of office. It might even be a reason to exert congressional oversight. But is it a reason to impeach him? I think the argument there is actually fairly strong on Dershowitz's part, and again, it gives me no pleasure to say that. Okay. Oh, and then another point, I just, at least tentatively praised the soundness of the arguments that Ken Starr and Dershowitz made today. But there were other Trump lawyers. I couldn't listen to the whole thing. Again, I use my C-SPAN app if I'm driving or from out to pick up bits and pieces here and there. But I did hear one part where you had one of the Trump attorneys bragging about how tough Trump has been on Russia, especially compared to his predecessor, Obama, who they essentially called a weakling because Obama did not provide lethal weaponry to Ukraine. But Trump did. Isn't that wonderful? They were super excited about that provision of lethal weaponry to Ukraine, and they were citing it as a defense to Trump because they wanted to portray Democrats' accusations of him against Trump as furthering or abetting Russian aggression as silly, given the whole totality of antagonistic anti-Russia stances that Trump has taken. And they're right that Trump has taken many aggressive anti-Russia positions. We've been over them many times, one of which being the lethal arms to Ukraine. But then again, this is why you can't rely on the Trump partisans to give you a rational perspective on any of this, because they are celebrating this antagonism. They are touting the belligerent policy posture as indicative of how Trump is blameless. And in fact, he's better than Obama. But what they don't mention is that this runs totally counter to Trump's rhetoric in the campaign in 2016, even his rhetoric now. His rhetoric now is generally conciliatory toward Russia, but the policy tells a much different story. That's why the rhetoric is almost meaningless at this point. The policy is ramping up, as Tulsi would say, the new Cold War with Russia in many different facets. So this Trump lawyer, whose name is escaping me now, I apologize, he was saying that Obama capitulated because he said to Medvedev in 2012 on the hot mic that he would have more flexibility after the election, and he gave in to Russia by not funding the missile defense system and putting missiles in Poland early enough. And that was supposed to provide an exculpatory contrast for Trump, because Trump has done many of those things. He has antagonized Russia. So what's the dynamic we have here? We have the Democrats making a pro-impeachment case against Trump that is predicated on a whole variety of hawkish, militaristic, new Cold War premises. And then we have the Trump lawyers, his defense, countering with their own militaristic, hawkish, new Cold War premises. So you just have this grisly confluence of hawkish excess, which are just two sides of the same coin. It's insanely unhealthy and dangerous. Because again, all of this logic is being embedded into the fabric of American governance now. Because when these things are hashed out over the course of an impeachment trial, that gives it far more long-lasting consequence. And it is not good. So speaking of anti-Russia belligerence, interesting anecdote from the Tulsi event tonight in Meredith, New Hampshire. At her event tonight, there was a whole group of foreign diplomats who were there, who had came to New Hampshire on a bus trip from DC. So diplomats from all different countries on many different continents all made their way to small town New Hampshire to go to Tulsi's event. Now, they said that they were going to many events. It was just sort of an observational trip so they could experience the U.S. electoral process firsthand. They all found it interesting and they wanted to sort of just be there, experience it, which is not uncommon. I've actually met foreign diplomats and representatives at other events in the past. But the one guy who I was able to speak to before they all hurried off when the event was over, he was a Lithuanian diplomat. So he's from Lithuania. Now, he was I think he said it was the defense ministry. And after the event, we chatted a little bit before the event, and afterwards, I asked him what he thought of Tulsi's presentation, and he said, "Yeah, I don't like the fact that she's campaigning against the new Cold War." And he said that her new Cold War stuff is terrible. We Lithuania, we want the U.S. to be in this aggressive posture against Russia. And in fact, what he said was that Trump's aggressive posture was great for him. He loved it. He loved that Trump, maybe not rhetorically, maybe not Trump individually as the figurehead, but the Trump administration, in the Pentagon, the State Department, all the apparatuses that comprise U.S. official foreign policy. Remember that phrase? They have all been marshaled against Russia and have ramped up hostilities. And the Lithuanian diplomat said that was great. So this is not a perspective you're going to get much anywhere else in the media, for the most part. You're not going to hear that one of a representative from a country in your Eastern Europe, the Baltic states, is praising the Trump administration for being hostile toward Russia, which they want. Here, it's all in the U.S. domestic political context. It's all how Trump is going easy on Russia or secretly helping Russia or compromised by Russia. But the observers in Europe, they're saying, wow, Trump's rhetoric is meaningless. He's actually taking a really hard line on Russia, and that's what we want, so we like it. And we dislike the candidates. Actually, there's really only one. We dislike the one candidate, Tulsi, who's campaigning against this. Interesting. Don't you think? Other observation from the event was so there's a lady who asked Tulsi a question, and then afterwards I chatted with this lady, and she said, and I tweeted about this earlier. You may have seen it. The lady told me that she literally had never heard of Tulsi at all until today, and she heard about her because she works at a hospital near Meredith, New Hampshire, right? And she said all the girls at the front desk were all talking about Tulsi and how much they liked her, and talking about how she was going to be in Meredith, New Hampshire tonight. And the lady was like, "Oh, I never heard of this person. I guess I'll have to look her up." So she Googled her and looked her up. Seemed like she was okay, right? And then this lady, her name was Kelly, came home, and there was a flyer for the Meredith, New Hampshire town hall in her door. That's what the canvassers do on the day of the town halls. They kind of go around whatever town it's going to be in and give out flyers and try to encourage people to attend. And so the lady said, I guess I got to go to this. And then she looked at the address for where the town hall was going to be located on the flyer, and it turned out that it was right next to her house. So she goes to this event. She asks a question. She meets Tulsi, loves her, says she just I think the way that she put it was she just felt that the way that Tulsi communicated her position was so easily understandable because she connected um, her proposals on healthcare and education and stuff to the broader theme of foreign policy, which is what she always does. And this woman just felt like it was intuitively understandable to her. So much so that now she's saying that she told me that she's going to support Tulsi. The woman's independent, and she and I asked her, so, who are you supporting before? And she said, Deval Patrick. Now, if you're not following the presidential race closely, you probably don't even know that Deval Patrick is even running. He was a late entrant, hasn't been in any of the debates, doesn't have any real national profile, although I do see ads for him on TV in New Hampshire where he's putting photos of himself with Obama. Again, you have to be sort of an obsessive to remember this, but in 2008, there was a minor controversy because Obama used some lines from one of Deval Patrick's speech in his speech, and this caused a plagiarism controversy, even though Deval Patrick came out and said that he recommended Obama use these lines, so it was done with his blessing. Anyway, this woman transitioned from Deval Patrick to Tulsi. She may be the only person in the entire country who transitioned from Deval Patrick to Tulsi. And she hadn't even heard of Tulsi till today. So it tells you how random, and I've discussed this before, how random and I don't want to say arbitrary, but kind of arbitrary voters' preferences can sometimes be. This woman was actually telling me that in the 80s, Bill and Hillary Clinton came and vacationed in Meredith, New Hampshire, and she knew them. Now, this is not formal fact check reporting. I'm just kind of you my conversation with this woman. But I don't see any reason why she'd be lying about this. But again, I would have to verify it. But this is what she said. But she says she didn't like Hillary because she seemed fake. She liked Bernie last time. Now it's going to be voting for Tulsi. So there you have it. Going to now scroll through my super chats. Somebody says, The Journey of Bolton from Right-Wing Zealot to Rock of the Republic as a book title. Somebody should write that book. Jim says, another great show. Thank you, sir. Today, Majin Bull says, today MSDNC praised Romney, called him moderate. Yeah, right. Erica sends a friendly GIF with what looks like to be an anthropomorphized lemon clapping his or her hands together. Thank you. Now, one more point on Bolton. When I see sort of the conservative commentary about him, it makes me laugh. Let me show you this screenshot, which you may have seen. This is from Lou Dobbs today, who was on a tirade against Bolton. Lou Dobbs is just 100% pro-Trump booster, no nuance, no questions about anything. He's just in love with Trump. Which, if you like Trump, we support him, fine, but just to have your entire existence around defending the president is very lame, regardless of who the president is. Anyway, here's Lou Dobbs. You see that? That's Lou Dobbs having a graphic that says Bolton is a tool for the left. So that's what they're going with now, vis-a-vis Bolton. They're saying he's a tool for the left. Okay. John Bolton was a paid Fox News contributor for over a decade, I think. Fixture of conservative think tank world. CPAC speaker. He's not a tool for the left. Okay. And if that's the way you want to depict him now, just because you don't like his conduct regarding Trump, then you're just blinkered. There are many credible arguments you might be able to make about Bolton that don't involve portraying him as a tool for the left. It's just silly. So, I mean, and you see this on some online commentator as well. They kind of make it seem like as though John Bolton just magically appeared in the administration out of nowhere to undermine Trump, as if Trump didn't appoint him when his deranged views were well known. Not long before Trump appointed Bolton, Bolton wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal calling for a preemptive strike on North Korea, and then Trump appoints him and involves him in the negotiations with North Korea, and then acts surprised when Bolton ruins those negotiations. I mean, give me a break. So they you have the conservative commentariat taking the knives out for Bolton while not at all acknowledging the role that Trump played by empowering Bolton and bringing him into a position in the administration where he could cause problems. It's like Trump had no agency here. Trump had total agency. The national security advisor position is not even subject to Senate confirmation, so Trump could have appointed anybody he wanted, and he chose John Bolton, probably because he saw John Bolton on TV. That's how Trump makes some of his personnel decisions. So that's sort of sad. What else? Okay, and then today there was this big, long, exhaustive article in the New York Times on what else the Bernie Bros. They're resurrecting the Bernie Bro attack to make it seem like there's this deranged army of internet trolls that are going after all of Bernie's opponents, especially women and people of color. In this article, it leads off with an anecdote that had been well known prior to this article being published, but this is the first time that I know of it being on the record of Kamala Harris confronting Bernie on the floor of the Senate and saying, "Do we have a problem?" And Bernie's like, "What? What are you talking about?" And the problem Kamala Harris was questioning Bernie about stemmed from when there was first buzz around Kamala potentially running for president in 2017. Some people on the internet were a little bit mean to Kamala and bringing up some of the problems with her potential candidacy. And Kamala, apparently in her mind, felt that this meant that Bernie was personally responsible for random anonymous people on the internet saying mean things about her. That's the underlying logic here. The anonymous comments, tweets, emails, Reddit posts, those are all somehow personally attributable to Bernie, and he must apologize for them and denounce them and disavow them. But if you give an inch to that insanely moronic logic, what happens is that you're giving credence to the framing of the people who would espouse such a moronic attack. And they're never going to be satisfied. You can denounce and disavow and apologize all you want, but there's always going to be another episode where people on the internet are acting mean. That's how the internet has worked since it began. And so if you're in this apology mode, there's always going to be something else to apologize for or denounce or disavow. So my feeling on this has always been, not just in the context of Bernie, but really anybody, including myself, because I sometimes also get this attack. Oh, there are people who follow you on Twitter who are mean and they've attacked me. You sick them on me. Just like, do you understand how Twitter works? I can only ever be responsible for my own account, what I say and do. If somebody randomly decided to be mean to you, I'm sorry, maybe the proper course for you would just be to log off or even delete your account rather than trying to suggest that I need to micromanage my followers. I mean, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. It was dumb when I first started hearing this line of attack in 2016, and it's just gotten progressively dumber. So in this Bernie Bro New York Times article, it's like a greatest hits. So that Bernie, they insinuate that Bernie could control his followers online, and chooses not to because of some dark, sinister reason. They say they're venomous. That's the word they use. Venomous followers out there who have tweeted snake emojis at Elizabeth Warren. Oh my God, the horror! They tweeted an animal emoji at a political figure. I don't know how we're going to survive that as a republic. And some of the classic, just anti-Bernie troll figures, like this woman, Angry Black Lady, that's her handle, and Sadie Doyle, and some of these people who you might remember if you were involved in the online wars of the 2016 primary. They're now brought back up as leading authorities on how awful the Bernie online following is to them as vulnerable women. Yeah, sure. Any adult who makes it central to their political identity, the fact that they get quote harassed online, which generally just means they're getting vituperative responses to their contentious political claims. Anybody who makes that like the focal point of their political existence is just a baby. And don't make concessions to babies. That's my feeling. All right, people. Thank you for tuning in. Back again tomorrow, same time, same place. Be well. So long. Farewell. Goodbye. Boop, boop, boop.